It's Wednesday, so that means we're back. Welcome, everybody. I am happy to be here, as always, to continue unearthing where we are and identifying where we want to go, right? I just wanted to say that I think things from the basement, in terms of the conversation of this, just need to be tabled for a little while. I was really torn up about whether to post that information about me and drinking and let that truth hang out there, right? Because I don't want you to think like that's something I operate with, right? That's not a normal course of action for me. That's why it threw me so much to find myself on Saturday in that state, right? Because I've worked a lifetime not to be that person anymore. But stuff still shows up, especially when it's ingrained in us as pathology of actions that we take that are against what we want. And while, yes, there is real value in me posting that, there is real value in allowing people to see what it looks like when you have thoughts that lead to actions that are incongruent with who you are and what you want. I understand what it feels like to not be able to trust yourself, right? And that's what that kind of pattern of behavior loops us into. It disassociates us with our own selves and our own ability to trust ourselves, because we don't know if we're going to go off and be doing, crazy stuff like that. We don't know. So we lose trust in ourselves. We lose the ability to be in control, to be master and commander of us, our lives, and our minds. That's why mind-altering chemicals, drugs, alcohol, things like that can be so dangerous. Because for me, again, it triggers something that, leads me down a very self-destructive path. That's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to be focusing on. I've moved past that. And I don't want to paint myself as that person in front of you. I don't want you to think I'm that person. That's old wiring and programming. Doesn't mean it's not nothing. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does, right? And so when stuff like that comes up, I will try to address it in the least triggering manner possible. I don't know that I accomplished that last time, and I apologize for that. I really had to be thinking about this a lot because I'm figuring this out, right? I mean, let's get really clear. What I'm doing in here is practicing, right? So that when the opportunity arrives for me to have a speaking gig, whether I am prepared or not, I feel very comfortable stepping in front of a microphone and talking for a half an hour on anything, right? That's practice. And my practice requires me to come in here and try and get better. Try and do better, right? Because once I click that into alignment, click, and I hit a certain vibrational tone in here that is going to be more attractive to an audience, build it and they will come. Right? You got to start. You got to start somewhere. That's the hardest part. Right? So that's what I'm in here doing. So we've identified what is pathology, right? That really, out of left field, counter to yourself behavior that is often rooted in trauma and destruction of your own life, right? I get that. Okay? And so it's important for me to share that in terms of letting you know that if you have that, I get you. I see you. I understand you. You're not crazy. You just have some stuff that we got to unpack a little bit, see why it's there. Maybe create some new boundaries. I shouldn't be drinking. Not when the percentage of that behavior showing up is so high, right? Anyhow, I apologize a little bit for that if that was upsetting or troubling for anyone. I'm going to try and do better along those lines. Doesn't mean stuff won't come up. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't unpack, right, the really dense and the really undesirable when it shows up. We should. Right? That's part of what we're doing in here is normalizing conversations around trauma and stuff that happens to us that nobody talks about, and yet we're all dealing with. I hope to normalize conversations around that and around sex and around like all of these like taboo things. Like Americans are often extremely immature in their attitudes around things. Like this puritanical hangover that we have in this country is nuts to me. And I don't get it. But that's the world we live in. So that could be seen as a complaint, or that can be seen as a charge, right? As a mandate, as a direction. Because all these painful and uncomfortable things hold, two sides of an equation in it. And so it's just up to you what you're going to do with it. Especially when it comes to, like we talked about that poet before, justified anger. Oof. Justified anger, right? It lives in you, as it should, because it's justified, right? Something or someone did something that was unfair and a burden, and you just happen to be the recipient because you happen to be in their world, right? Justified anger. So if we look at that, justified anger is having the two sides, right? What do we do with it, right? Does it have the kernel of complaint, or does it have the kernel of opportunity? What are you doing with your justified anger? There is options. Right? There are options available to us and what we want to do with that. I clearly have just been working through my stuff. Right? But it's in the unpacking of it, and I'm so grateful for this process that started with the writing of my books. I actually started writing my books as kind of like a trauma journal, like with the intention of just unearthing that stuff and taking a look at it. So, that's why the book's a little dense and dark. At least the first one, right? Because it's a story of evolution through the 3 books. And the first book, obviously, because it's a story of evolution, has to start in the basement, right? In order for the storyline to have some trajectory. So I've actually had a bunch of people who wanted to read the book who said they couldn't. Especially people who know me. It was too dense for them. They maybe haven't lived that violent of an experience, that violent of a world, right? So to see that and how that world brings you to meet God. My favorite explanation of my books of the first series is that it is a cross between, it's the intersection of Conversation with God. Do you remember that book by Neil Donald Walsh? It like rocked the world in the 80s because somebody published a book about their conversations with God that happened in their own head. Like they themselves could talk to God and then just publish that conversation. It rocked the world. It was the first time I had ever seen somebody put their relationship with their higher power in a way that was so interpersonal. There was no middleman. There was no Bible. There was no pastor. It was just this dude and his conversations with God as he understood it. That was revolutionary to me in my little teenage mind. being extricated from my faith-based community violently, while still searching, while still being a seeker, while still knowing that there's something inside of me that needs to be unearthed and celebrated, right? That I wasn't a bad person, I was just in a bad environment with bad people. Right? So, justified anger. How does it live in you? With the kernel of complaint or the kernel of opportunity? It's so hard. It's really tough. And it requires a certain amount of evolution and a certain amount of consciousness and a certain amount of critical thinking to determine who you are and what you're gonna do with that justified anger. Right? How do we want that to live in us? Do we want it to live in us with the kernel of complaint? Do we want that kernel of complaint, that, thing that gets under your skin? You want that energy living in you like that? As I showed before, the only way to get something negative out of your mind that just keeps running in circles and bedeviling you and causing you problems, the only way to get that energy out of your head is to forgive whatever it's attached to. That's the eviction notice. I forgive you. Now go. Your voice has been heard from too much. And I call for silence from that voice. Justified anger has to live in the past. Justified anger can never live, well, I shouldn't say never. Rarely does it live in the present, right? Unless you're in the middle of an actual real triggering event, But for the most part, the way that we're talking about casually here, we're talking about justified anger. That's something that has happened in the past. It's not happening in today. Today is a beautiful day. I don't know if you've taken a look, right? So the opportunity that lives in justified anger, if it's not attached to the past and it's attached today, and it is attached to opportunity, I like to look at it like this. Any crap, any abuse, any just horrible experiences in your life, be thankful for those. Be thankful for those. That's where the extracurricular activity is going on for you to fast track yourself in this work. Be grateful for that. If you hadn't had those really dense and dark experiences where you were taken to the depths of your being, you would have been denied the opportunity of being taken to the depths of your being. What did you find there? What did you learn about yourself in that place? Did you learn you were strong? That you're resilient? That you're loving? That you can forgive? Because we can't take any of that personal, right? Just like we talked about before. Like, everybody's unhealthy. Don't know if you've noticed. Right? And we're all working through our stuff. We are all working through it. Some at different paces, right? But that's the world we live in, which is extremely dense, run by humans who are not all that smart. If we take intelligence from the intelligence of the universe to the intelligence of man. It's all relative. Anyhow, but that's who we live with. That's who we experience planet Earth with, is a bunch of imperfect, hurt humans who are lashing out and hurting others. And yeah, we're going to be in the proximity of some who lash out and hurt us because they're just doing their deal, but we just happen to be, in the way. right? We're just the byproduct of them needing to scratch their itch, whatever it is that they're going through or doing in their life. So we can't take any of that personal. None of it. I mean, even the most horrific abuse, it's not about you. So we need to stop making it about us. It was about them working through their stuff and having their human experience that they needed to do in order to get to where they're going, right? So we can just release that. We can just let that go. Unburden ourselves from justified anger, because we know it serves no real purpose other than to muddy today from yesterday's ick. That's not where we want to live, right? Is that where you want to live? Is that a choice you're making? Because it can be. It can be. But it's up to you to decide for yourself whether you want to forgive them and let go of the energy. I sure do. The basement is closed. The basement is closed. I do not want to revisit anything there. It's still too fresh. And if I continue to open that door and pick at those old wounds, they will never heal. I think I need to take a year off from anything in the basement to allow myself the space to develop new thought patterns that don't involve that don't involve the past, that don't involve association to triggers and trauma. Not that it won't come up, obviously. I'm not completely in charge of all of that all the time. I'm doing my best, but I'm human. And for that, I give myself grace. So, basement is closed. Basement is closed. We are going to be looking at new thought patterns, right, in the direction of where we're heading. Because where we're heading is getting really good. I don't know if you can feel it. I can. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of new work that is going to be challenging us in so many new and different ways. And often we are going to want to just close the book and not do it for that day. Because this work requires us to get uncomfortable at what we're looking at, right? Because what we're looking at is, our own foolishness, our own humanity, our own mistakes, and our own way of being in this world. There's a lot of stupid stuff in there. Right? We've all done a bunch of stupid stuff because that's called learning, right? And we need to abandon the idea that anything we have ever done is wrong, right? We are moving away from a world that operates in right and wrong, or good and bad. Those words stem from the ego and the ego only. There's no such thing as a universal good or a universal bad, or a universal right or a universal wrong. Good to whom? Bad to whom? Right to whom? Wrong to whom? It's all just a judgment call. There's no, actual measuring stick there. And we keep thinking that there is. And that's why we can't get along. This person thinks that's good, but that person thinks that same thing is bad. Well, then you just end up in egoic fights over who's right and who's wrong. That whole idea has got to be abandoned. The whole thing, right? And anytime you find yourselves in conversations where right and wrong or good and bad are the measuring stick for what you're trying to get to, stop. You will get nowhere. Because everyone in the conversation is going to have a different guide or measuring stick for what is good or what is bad, what is right or what is wrong. But collectively as humans, we can get together a little bit more, just slightly, not always, but a little closer to the mark, to say, okay, but that action right there, was that loving? That's slightly more clarifying. That's slightly more unifying in terms of actually getting us somewhere. Let's just take a quick example. Is the Catholic Church good or bad? Well, to whom? But is the Catholic Church loving? Now there's a conversation I want to have. So, that's where we're going, right? The really good stuff. And as I was breaking it down on Friday, I was gaining a lot more clarity. So it's a little bit herky-jerky, like when I'm trying to work through a concept. But I finally got there, didn't I? Because I knew I was right on the edge of it. And sometimes when I say it, even when I say it wrong, I still hear myself saying it. It was like when I was kind of scoffing, quite frankly, at the highly evolved, wasn't I? Because I arrived to everything, even, right, noticing the highly evolved in my life and going, what the hell is this shit? Right? Like, what is wrong with you people? Why do you all just, walk around in your day like you've been lobotomized and your emotional experience and bandwidth of planet Earth is this wide? Remember me saying all that? I said that, and all that is true, and all that is the actual goal. But as I was languaging it and describing it for one of the very first times, I attached a kernel of complaint to it, didn't I? Right? Those highly evolved people are just all so happy all the time, like, oh, God, aren't they awful? Right? And I was going on saying how they've, neutered out the negative. They have. And that's the goal. Ding, 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 right? Ding, ding, ding. Because even when I say it wrong, I still hear myself saying it. Because if joy is the only mandate from the universe, and joy and love are defined as the absence of judgment, then in order to adopt wholly throughout your entire being an air of non-judgment, to completely resonate with no judgment, right? You have to get to a place of we are all one and that there is no separation. And in that space where there is no separation between me and you, right, it gets really clear really fast that in order to affect change to the vibration of the planet, which is what this whole thing's about, right? Which I've been talking about since day one, that in order to affect the most change to the vibration of Mother Earth, we ourselves must tune ourselves and dial to a station that emanates with that energy, right? And that's what those highly evolved people are doing that I called, lobotomized mindset. Right? But, they've got it down. And I recognize that even that I was saying it while I was holding a space to be eventually one of those people who radiates with joy, who has abandoned all else, who has gone on vacation, and understand that troubles are not ours. Troubles are not ours, right? And that fear is optional, and that the only mandate from the universe is joy. Can you trust that? I know it's so difficult. It's like agreeing to go and be homeless. Like the abandonment of the security, right? Because that's what we've got all piled up in our, landscape of our understanding, is the little bricks that we put in there that are supposed to make us feel safe and protected, right? When we abandon those and just say, yep, the universe has got it covered. I do not need to worry. I do not need to worry. What? Your ego just starts to freak out. You need to worry. You need to worry a lot. You don't. You really don't. So long as you're living a conscious life, helping others, doing good work, right? Being in alignment with self and radiating with joy, which is the only mandate of the universe, you will be in good care. Thank you for today. I hope that you got something out of that. And as always, I will see you on Friday. Bye.